know this has taken forever, but in the name of bringing you guys interesting content, I've basically been traveling the planet. But now, winter is upon us. Never did I believe when I bought this car that I would ever be bringing you the first drive in November. Woke up to -4 this morning. Convenient when you've got 770 horsepower through the rear wheels alone. But let's save the details for now and give you a little bit of an overview as to what makes this thing so special as a car and so special to me. So, first about the car, let's start with the TDF bit. So TDF is an abbreviation for Tour de France, and that name comes from a endurance race that took place in France during the sort of mid to late 1950s. Now Ferrari built a car called the 250 TDF, which is in essence the original version of this car, and that was effectively a race car for the road. Bear that piece of information in mind because it's very important as to setting the context of this car. Now, just so happens that the 250 TDF ended up winning absolutely everything that Ferrari entered itself into. So the letters TDF are obviously very important in the world of Ferrari. Now, most people would quite rightly be forgiven for thinking that the TDF is in essence the sort of 458 Speciale equivalent of the F12. And I totally understand why. On the outset, it is ultimately lighter weight, more track-focused version of the car it's based on, which in this case is the F12. But if we look at the Speciale for a moment and then compare it with the TDF, there is one subtle difference which changes the DNA of the car. So think of the Speciale as a 458 Italia, which has had some weight stripped out of it and made it a little bit more track-focused. The F12 TDF, they have approached with the original mindset of the 250 TDF, which is race car for the road. So one is a road car for the track, the other is a track car for the road. How they've managed to achieve that differentiation in the F12 TDF is by using the engine components out of their XX program. Now, for those of you guys who may not be familiar with Ferrari's XX program, it is a thoroughbred racing R&D development platform for cars that are only available to go on circuit. Why that's significant is that technology from the 599XX made its way into this car, namely a good chunk of the engine components. So much so that if you look down the parts list of the engine components of the F12 TDF, it literally says XX next to them. So this is direct components from the XX program. What that results in is actual race car feel for the road, and this is where they've really done the car justice by calling it a TDF, as it's a proper nod to the ethos of the 250 TDF that won so many races. This really has race car components for the road. As a result, what you have is the most deceptively agile car I think I have ever driven. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, obviously when you walk over to the TDF, you approach it with your GT brain in, your Grand Tourer brain, because ultimately it has the familiar aesthetics and foundation of the standard F12, the F12 Berlinetta. But it's not until you get in it and you take your first few hundred yards and you make your very first steering input that you realize that, oh my god, this thing is from a different planet, particularly steering inputs. Now, what has made this car so sharp and so agile is that to improve front-end turning, Ferrari fitted the front wheels with 275 section tyres. I mean, for clarification, that translates to huge. I mean, I don't know of cars outside actual race cars that have 275 section front tyres. Once again, this is where that race car lineage is coming in. They're putting it into physical components of the car. Now, it turns out that when you put 275 section tyres on the front of the F12, it has monumental turn-in capabilities. The front nose on this is unlike any road car I've ever driven. You don't so much as steer it with your arms as you sort of guide it with your wrists. It's super agile. how that's come about is because after fitting 275 section front tyres to the nose of this, it became so agile that they had to counteract the rear following it round so fast with rear wheel steering. It's the first Ferrari ever to have rear wheel steer. The result is that it has created this virtual short wheelbase, which has given this car the craziest handling. And the reason being is because it's deceptive. You approach it, as I mentioned, as an F12, it turns in sharper than a 458 Speciale. It's the weirdest thing, and it does actually take a little bit of adapting to. Now on top of that, and for me what makes this car truly, truly special is the relationship between the engine and the gearbox. So we just listen to these downshifts. I mean, where'd you go from there? And the upshifts, listen to this. Oh my good God! It's unbelievable. Now, here's what makes the drivetrain of this car very special. First of all, the relationship between the two main components of this, gearbox and engine. Now this has a twin clutch gearbox, and as such it shifts with incredible accuracy and dynamics, and it's just a very, very seamlessly fast shift, as all twin clutch gearboxes are. I'm actually benchmarking this against the twin clutch box in the Porsche GT3. It shifts a very similar speed, which if you watch car content regularly, you'll know is probably the benchmark for the quickest shifting gearbox in the world. And the GT3, of course, is all very impressive and whatnot, but that's running 500 horsepower and a mere 6 cylinders. The TDF is running 12 cylinders and 770 brake horsepower and vastly more torque, and it's still able to respond with the same shift speed. However, Ferrari have taken it to another level, because I understand that some people feel that a twin clutch gearbox, particularly a PDK, is somewhat sanitized because it doesn't really deliver the shift with much enthusiasm. It just sort of seamlessly slams it home with no more than audible tone change to indicate that you've shifted a car. So what you do with the TDF is you switch this little button here called Manatino, and you put it into a setting called Race. Now then, this is where things go all kinds of fantastic. Now, if you watch the channel regularly, and I know I say that regularly, but here's some context, you'll know that I've never been a big fan of the Aventador because of its single clutch gearbox being a little bit clunky. It comes into its own when you're going very quickly, and it can slam it home, and it delivers that slam with a real reassuring thud. What Ferrari have done, have taken the best of both worlds, the seamlessness of a twin clutch gearbox and the aggressive thud of a single clutch. So when you're in race mode and you do this, it gives you ultra fast shifts with ultra aggressive deployment of the cogs. It's unlike anything. It really truly is in its own space. And to get, look at those downshifts. Look at that. Did you hear that cog shift and the downshifts? Listen to it. And I promise you right now, my foot is pressing quarter throttle. Oh my God. Do you know what's great about me sharing this video right now? It genuinely is the first time that I've kind of unleashed this thing, and you're witnessing it along with me for the first time. Now, one thing which is another very unique trait and characteristic of the TDF is that it's one of the very few modern day supercars which sort of takes no prisoners. Now, what I mean by that is it doesn't flatter you, and it only rewards you when you sort of reward it. It's one of the few modern day supercars that you really have to think twice about before depressing your foot and unleashing all of those ponies. Good God. I mean, it's actually quite an intimidating experience. I am not joking. On this road, I have yet to get past half throttle so far. Have you heard anything like it? Oh, good Lord. Earlier on today on my drive here at 6 in the morning, when the ground was quite cold, I had this in sport and traction control was active all the way till 5th gear. And that's because it's just got such a vast swell of torque. Now, if you manage that with less right foot, you can drive this just as you would a standard F12 Berlinetta. And that's what's wonderful about this car. It is still of a Grand Tourer platform. It has one of the largest boots of any car I've ever owned that has 2 seats. Like, by far, it's huge. You could use it every single day. Granted, the feeling of the suspension and dampers, you know that you're in something stiffer. It is, after all, a TDF. It is still a sort of track bias car. But you could use it just as you would an F12. And that's what makes the breadth of ability of this thing so special. You can chill as we are now, or as you've seen a minute ago, you can turn up the wick and it actually makes your palms sweat. What's wonderful about it is that it creates that noise without having to go really that fast. And that's fantastic, because as a road car, you don't always want to have to wring its neck in order to appreciate what you're driving. Arguably, the naturally aspirated Ferrari V12 is the holy grail of engines, and to be able to appreciate its tone and sound without wringing its neck is a wonderful thing that in this day and age is really quite rare. In this car, we're doing 27 miles an hour now. I love that. And the tone is wonderful. You might be wondering then, why don't Ferrari make their other special edition cars or their other track focus cars this hardcore? Well, this car was strictly invite only. When it launched, I didn't have the money or the profile to get invited to buy one, but I just knew when I saw it, I knew when I read about it and what it stood for, that this was a car that had what I wanted in a car written all over it. And so why it means a lot to me is because it was the dream car. It was the car that I thought I would never achieve, because as soon as they hit the tarmac, they were so rare that their values went crazy. Now, the reason that Ferrari have been able to make this car extra hardcore is that, as I mentioned, they were by invite only, and so they went to clients that both the Ferrari and the dealership believed would appreciate the ethos of this car. And so as a result, Ferrari didn't have to hold back. They didn't have to make it something that would flatter your average driver. They made it for people that have had collections of these cars, probably race in Ferrari's own racing programs, and are probably even part of the XX program that has made this car so special. So they didn't have to tippy-toe around and take the edge off things and dumb it down. In fact, they did the opposite. They turned this thing up to 11 and made it absolutely mental. So you're probably thinking, well, what kind of components are you talking about? Which bits have made it from the XX program? Well, one of the more significant upgrades has been the replacement of hydraulic tappets for mechanical tappets. What that lets the engine do is rev a lot freer and higher. This is topping out basically 9,000 RPM from a naturally aspirated V12. But it's not only that, it's the way that the engine responds. You can hear it on these downshifts. You heard how quickly that engine spools up, and that is translated to the throttle response as well. Your right foot is controlling a bomb, and it's just the slightest of inputs. But all of these components, while on paper they may not look or sound much, I always find that these upgrades are greater than the sum of their parts. The effect it has, the overall effect it has emotionally and on the inputs of the car, on this is the most dramatic change that I've felt to a single platform. It's out of this world responsive. Once again, I'm not sure if you're familiar with my content, but I'm really having to concentrate threading this thing. After all, it's not the smallest of cars either. It's still based on the F12 footprint, and it's even wider. You can tell by the flared bodywork that it's a pretty chunky car. It's not until you get it on a Great British B road that you realise just how chunky it is. But once you start flowing and that rear wheel steer starts working, it's amazing how this thing can shrink around you and you can find a flow, albeit with the most minimal of inputs. Preferably through both throttle and steering. It's surgical, this thing. Wow. Honestly, throttle pickup is... Listen, I mean, at the minute I'm spending some time in a McLaren 720S, and while that thing is absolutely ballistically fast, it wouldn't know throttle response like this. It's a different world. And so the day comes to an end. Now, we're in November, the clocks have gone back, the light is drawing in. We do, however, have a magnificent sunset to make up for it. But finally, here is the first drive video. I hope it's been worth waiting for. What this means is we've effectively broken the seal now on F12 content, which means we can TDF all day long. So expect a lot more TDF content coming on the channel very soon. Please leave your comments below. If there's anything I've missed out with regards to something you want to know about the TDF, please leave it in the comments below and I'll try and address it in videos in the future. But as always, thanks so much for watching. I shall see you next time. Ciao.